Chip and I are here at this owner designed garden. So the entrance is the new large stepping stones that take us to the front gate with fruitless olives that branch out over this walk, eventually creating a cool entrance to this courtyard area. For right now, they're not real big, and so this is about as large as we can get them at a reasonable cost. Both sides of the main entrance look similar. Those are not walking paths. Those are more variations in texture and color that can look stream or water-like, and they go throughout the garden and provide some relief. Once the ground cover grows in, I think that'll be more effective. And that same ground cover we're growing in between these large stepping stones. This garden is a total remodel of a garden that was originally done in the 60s when the house was built. You'll recognize how it looked, just a big lawn and then foundation planting, so plants up against the house. Really no thought put to making it useful. Owner wanted to get away from that and do something that was more contemporary and address the needs. One of the needs is this faces south and it gets just baked in the summer. And so they wanted large trees that would shade the house over time. And then they wanted to grow vegetables in a garden without the whole yard looking like a vegetable garden. And they also wanted it to be low water using. And so they wanted a plant palette of completely low water using plants. So this is really a favorite of mine that I had a hard time finding, so I ordered them myself from the grower. This one is called Mirage Blue, and it's Salvia gregii, Mirage Blue. And it does better than most salvias I plant in that the leaves stay lush, it doesn't get real big, it stays low, blooms like crazy all the time except in the middle of the winter, and has a really nice looking vivid bloom, whereas some of them are more dreary in their bloom. This is Mirage Purple, and you can see it's just a slightly different hue to it. It is more violet, and the Mirage Blue still looks purple, but these will look a lot more impressive once they've been in the ground a year or so. Here's a plant that isn't doing as well as I'd like. It's a Japanese grass, which I think would look great here over this cobble. We just have cobble at the entrance, but it's burning and it's getting too much sun. I might replace it with something else, or we might see it improve dramatically when we get into September. So I'm kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with it. If I replace it, I'm thinking of replacing it with Dianella, which is a grass that I think would look neat here and low water using and has a nice bloom on it. This cobble we just set on decomposed granite, and then we put sand in between. These butterfly bush were planted then amongst the cobble, and that's a nice look here at the entrance. The plumbago is blooming nicely. These are some of those transplanted roses mixed in with our ice cap roses, which is a dwarf iceberg. The ground cover is spreading, and I think we might get pretty good coverage by the end of the summer. So this was a lawn, it was a Bermuda lawn, and so we killed the Bermuda 2 or 3 times, and we've pretty much gotten rid of it. I can see a spot right here at this entrance. This is the Bermuda re-emerging, and if you don't do anything about it, it'll reestablish and grow everywhere. You can probably pull it out and get the root, and so you don't need to spray it. You could just pull it out. You're looking for things like this so that it doesn't get mixed in with the new ground cover. The trees that we used here are Keith Davey Chinese pistache, which is Chinese pistache that's grafted, and so that it doesn't have berries and guarantees the fall color, spectacular fall color. A large southern live oak. Then we used the fruitless olives lining the walk, and then we used multi-trunk Natchez crepe myrtle. You'll see 3 of them. The other thing about establishing this garden is we planted it in June, and it was very hot. It was 100 degrees when we planted it, and so we watered every day. And now slowly we're toning down that watering, and we're down to every other day, probably in another couple of weeks be every 3rd or 4th day, but we're watering less and less. And it's a drip system, so you don't see any sprinklers. The plants are either watered with individual emitters, or we have the rows of tubing with the emitters built in where we want ground cover to fill in. The soil is one of the most important parts of this garden, and we did some abuse of the soil in the beginning because we had to kill the Bermuda. All of the garden we amended with our blend at a heavy rate, about 20 pounds per thousand. And then during the planting process, we use our Penetrate liquid biotiller. It's kind of like a liquid organic matter. As you can see, the plants are doing well. It's now turning into excellent soil, and especially if every 6 months to a year or so we make a reapplication of the blend, it will really be good soil after a couple of years. A big part that we're facing here is a courtyard was created, which is a nice part of a front garden to make it more useful. And the courtyard is defined by this new fence, which we installed and painted a color called Dragon's Breath. This has a large expanse of paving, which is broken up with ground cover growing in between it. Eventually that ground cover will be solid, so it'll just look like green and concrete. There's a gate that goes to the driveway, and then this way goes to a future garden area. So the nature of the plants is different on the interior courtyard, an idea that I like even in Xeriscape gardens. In the entries and in close-up areas, you can have plants that require more water and are lusher. So the idea of the courtyard is it will have things like Japanese maples, an eastern redbud, lamb's ear, and variegated liriope, and special dwarf nandina, the smoked bush, which is the dwarf smoked bush. One of the things here is because of budget, a lot of the final parts of the garden aren't completed yet because they're going to be doing them later. One thing that you see a big box in the courtyard is a fountain. They purchased the fountain after because of cost, and then we just ran water and power to the area, so that's waiting to be installed. The other thing that you'll see throughout the garden that was a cost-saving measure is these little loops of wire, which is where low voltage LED garden lights are going to be going. So that's a way to save money where they're not going to purchase the lights and install the lights until later, maybe a year or two down the road. So this area is decomposed granite because it's going to be 3 or 4 raised planters for vegetables. And the planting idea is these shrubs, which look small right now, they'll grow together, be an informal hedge that'll be about 6 feet tall, that will screen the view of the vegetable garden from the street. But because of this exposure, we'll get a lot of sun and it'll be a good spot to grow vegetables. We walk in this area and it takes us to the side yard, which we built a fence to screen the neighbors and planted 3 dwarf citrus, which will fill this area in and provide kind of a nice view. They use some of these windows as an office and they'll look out into the citrus. And then on the other side of the driveway, we just did quite a bit of the 3/8 California Gold gravel, and then just some simple plantings, again with the drip irrigation. And that's pretty much a tour of this little remodel of a front yard that used to be a very traditional 60s style, and now a more modern, useful, interesting garden that saves water. It shades the house. It creates a front useful courtyard. So a much more useful, life-enhancing garden rather than something you just walk through to get to the front door. And all designed, as I said, by the owner, just with our input here and there to help her with some plant selections, but a nice job by her to come up with something that really reflects her taste and the way they intend to use the garden. If you like these garden tours, let us know and we'll do some more.